The Lumix G 12-60 f3.5 to 5.6, probably an overlooked kit lens that is considered to be pretty average or below average, but for the past 3 years, it's been my go-to lens for pretty much everything. YouTube, hello, my name is Natalie. I take photos, make videos, and post content that relates to creative topics in general. Those of you that have been watching this channel for a while now are most likely well aware of the fact that I predominantly shoot with a Micro Four Thirds system. My first ever camera that I invested in was the Panasonic GH5, and I got it with this guy over here, the Lumix G 12-60 f3.5 to 5.6 kit lens. And to any of you interested in full frame terms, this would be a 24 to 120mm, and I guess the depth of field produced would be similar to f7 to 11.2. Sort of. Now, at the time of purchasing these items, those details I just mentioned right now, those numbers, I'd done all the research, but practically speaking, those numbers, they meant nothing to me. The guys at the camera store mentioned that there was a pricier alternative to the lens, the Lumix Leica version of the 12-60, but at the time that appeal wasn't worth the extra few £100. I was tormented enough by the amount that I was spending as it was. I didn't have that experience to, in practical terms, understand the significance in that extra amount of light. I didn't want to spend more than I already was, and it's been about 3 years now, and I can confidently say that I have zero, and I mean I have zero regrets on that decision. Allow me to explain. Now, first off, this lens is light and affordable considering what you get. The focal range of this lens is great for beginners. It's ideal for all kinds of experimentation. It's great for landscapes, and it's perfectly fine for portraits. It's a practical lens for exploring lens compression with, depth of field with, and I would go as far as to argue that the number one downfall, the main negative of this setup as a Micro Four Thirds system, actually presents one of the most efficient learning opportunities to understand and maneuver around one of the most valuable concepts of photography and videography, aside from composition, and that's lighting. The Micro Four Thirds system and its relatively poor low light performance in comparison to a full frame system makes for a fantastic way for a beginner to learn how to read, understand shape, and manipulate light to work in their favor. It presents opportunities to learn in situations where perhaps someone with a full frame pro lens might take for granted. Shooting with this lens for the past 3 years has provided me with a wealth of knowledge and experience when it comes to using all different types of light to my advantage. Types of light that I guess otherwise may be taken for granted, as I just mentioned. If I'd had a camera system that was more sensitive to light, when it comes to video, having a camera that is prone to noise contamination under less dark conditions, then a more sensitive full frame sensor very quickly created an acute awareness of low light limitations in video. This kind of accumulation of experience that came with these mistakes I was making and learning from made that shift to full frame just satisfying. So by the time I was looking into full frame systems, I knew exactly what I was looking for in a hybrid camera. I knew which terms and catchphrases were more subjective than actual practicalities, such as color science and, to a certain degree, depth of field. Yeah, depth of field is what I'd say. If I was a complete beginner, if I'd gotten caught up in depth of field, I may have not invested in a Micro Four Thirds system, because I see a lot of videos that kind of discuss why they prefer full frame, because they prefer the compression they get, which is fair, it's totally fair, but it really isn't the ultimate everything in photography. Same as color science. I was pulling my hair out of my head by the time I was done figuring out which cameras had the better color science, and I kind of ended up just making peace with the idea or the fact that the camera I decided to go for had an inferior color science, which after not long I realized was just a very silly thought, a very silly concept. Regardless of my camera's picture profile, with my experience gained, I am pretty much in complete control of what my images look like in terms of exposure, contrast, color, and that is in both photo and video. Now, the point that I'm trying to make with all of this is that this lens over here, a seemingly unimpressive lens, has taught me so much so fast. And the major lessons I learned came from having a somewhat relatively limited setup. And with this initial setup, I've kind of set myself up to be so appreciative and almost hyper aware of the advantages that come with a higher end product. This lens has encouraged me to work to get a beautiful, professional looking shot. It's encouraged me to see and think like a photographer sooner or quicker because I couldn't afford to be comfortable. Now, I'm not saying that you need a lower end lens to learn all of these lessons. I am saying that I learned these lessons with a lower end lens, and my transition into higher end products just feels deserved, and I'm in a position to make the most of these new tools pretty much instantly because the lower end tools that I purchased at a time where the gear did not matter because I didn't know better taught me how to make the gear matter. And that's down to this lens over here. This lens taught me how to make gear matter. It served me well, and I put it to retirement now, knowing that I made the most of it. After 3 years, I found the Leica version of this lens brand new for £300, and the experience I'd gained with my Lumix made the decision a complete no-brainer. So to any of you beginners out there, if you're kind of torn between opting for full frame or a Micro Four Thirds system, and you're kind of in a similar position to what I was 3 years ago, where full frame would kind of mean needing to save for another year or so before upgrading from my phone, don't be discouraged by Micro Four Thirds. For me, being kind of confined to Micro Four Thirds in the first years kind of helped me filter out the noise of gear worries. This is the lens along with this one right here that I have with me right now. How can I use these to tell my story? They're light, more affordable than pro lenses, and they're great tools that will help you tell your story as you learn to use them. The quality of your images comes down to you and your understanding of the lighting around you. Now, just to clarify, I do have a variety of lenses for the GH5. I use the Sigma 18-35 f1.8. I have a 12mm. I also have a Mitacon 25mm Speedmaster, that 0.95. I also have a full frame camera along with 2 Sunny lenses and the Sigma 14-24 f2.8. So I have a selection, but when I'm limited to space during travel and when I'm not working on a pay project, I find I only pack in the 12-60 and sometimes the 25 f1.7. And I find that I have more than enough to work with. So to end off, this is not me saying don't go full frame. If you can afford full frame and that universe of lenses, that's really good, go for it. But if you can't, Micro Four Thirds, especially pre-owned, is a more affordable option and will teach you everything that you need to know to set you up. It'll set you up nicely to learn both photography and cinematography and how to overcome limitations that come with different types of lighting. So at the end of it all, this is a little goodbye to this guy over here, the 12-60 f3.5 to 5.6. It's been a great lens to start things off with, and that's all I can really say about that before kind of repeating my sentences and, thanks for watching.